going. So this afternoon, we're going to do something a little bit different with our seminar series, is that we're actually going to attempt to have 4 speakers go, and I'm going to try and be the first and the shortest amongst these 4. But really what we're doing is we're trying to share a partnership that I've been working to develop with some of my National Park Service partners. Actually, several of them are on here today. To bring Purdue Landscape Architecture, and more specifically our Center for Community and Environmental Design, into a relationship with the National Park Service's Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Area Assistance Program. And so, the Center for Community and Environmental Design, for those of you who don't know, has been around since 1976. We're a recognized center here at Purdue University. Most of the work that we do is focused in and around student learning and engagement, but we also kind of split across the entire mission area of the university between learning, research, and community outreach. And so, overall, where we're sitting right now as a staff is that I'm Aaron Thompson. I'm the faculty member in landscape architecture here at Purdue. I'm also the director of the Center for Community and Environmental Design. Currently, I'm carrying a staff of about, let's see, where we're at, 5 people this year. It varies a little bit up and down. A lot of undergraduate research assistant and research design assistants in that role. And then we're going to be talking here this afternoon about our National Park Service Landscape Architecture Fellow. And so I'm not going to steal Faith's thunder from her portion of the talk. But the things that the CCED is involved in is just some quick examples of this. This is a good example of our outreach work. And this is a partnership we have with the Purdue Center for Regional Development here at Purdue, and also with our nursing extension faculty, that we are developing a long-term plan for a drug and alcohol treatment recovery center in partnership with the Turtle Mountain Band of the Chippewa. It's actually on the reservation land. This is a long-term plan. We were brought in as consultants on this after some professional consultants had kind of stepped away from the project and weren't really providing the input that was needed. We were asked to really originally to kind of step in and provide just some support for long-term master planning and develop some graphics. Where this has evolved to is that it's allowed me over the last year to bring on 2 undergraduate design assistants who have spent the year really helping to flesh out what this campus will be, including developing plans for outdoor classrooms, developing plans for treatment and therapeutic garden spaces, to look at memorial spaces throughout the site. We're also developing plans for trails and an equine center on the site as well. And so a lot of different things that are going on in this. Speaking to our discovery mission, one of the things that we're really, that I've been really trying to build up within our center's capacity is focusing on bringing undergraduate students into research projects, and we've been very successful at that over the last few years. We believe that kind of the integration of design and research is an important part of developing young professionals in landscape architecture. A lot of this work has really been geared towards our integration between the center and our capstone program. This year, our capstone program has 16 independent study capstone service learning projects occurring across the state of Indiana. Actually, 15 of them are here in Indiana, and one of them is with the National Park Service in Springfield, Illinois. But we continue to push this as a priority, and getting students out and participating in the undergraduate research conference that Purdue hosts in the spring is something that we're doing as a part of that. When we talk about service learning, I think it's always important for those who aren't familiar to think about what a landscape architect, or to introduce people to what landscape architects can bring into this. This is a really good example from a year ago. Shuang Wen was one of our seniors that graduated last May with Faith, who's going to be speaking here in a little while. And her project was actually with the Purdue Fort Wayne Environmental Resource Center. And so we connected up, and we're partnering with the Resource Center at Purdue Fort Wayne. There's a faculty member that had been working with the community on a cancer cluster over the course of about 7 years. And they had gotten to a place in this project where they desperately needed a landscape architect to step in and help them come up with a long-term plan for redeveloping this industrial site that had been linked to the cancer cluster. Her project was able to provide that input. We were able to then integrate that into a research project discussing the role of students in environmental justice projects that was just published recently in the Journal of Applied Social Science. And so these are the kind of projects that we're involved in. In the 3 years, I guess I'm just wrapping up my 3rd year here at Purdue. we've been involved in, it's actually 47 total projects. 44 of those are in the state of Indiana. Service learning partnerships. It's a lot of management to keep students out there doing this, but we're doing a good job of developing the skills that let students work directly with communities and do the engagement themselves. And so this is a big part of our success. Some of that comes in integrating service learning opportunities earlier into our curriculum. The project that's featured here on this page is actually a park or community park master plan that we were involved in developing for the Delphi, Indiana community. That had unfortunately lost 2 young girls who were murdered on their trail system in 2017. The family of those girls worked with my junior level ecological planning and open space design studio in 2018 to develop a long-term plan. This park is actually under construction currently. In 2019, that same studio was recruited into a project at Purdue Extension, and so we work exclusively, and we work with partners. That's who we are with the center. It's part of our kind of being a low staff organization, as we're always reaching out and trying to figure out who we can support, and in turn kind of use that to fill the pipeline for the need for projects and landscape architecture studios. And so in 2019, we were able to work with a community down in Southeast Indiana, Connorsville. Connorsville, unfortunately, has been hit very hard by the opioid epidemic. And as part of the Purdue Extension's work in that community to bring community health back to the forefront, to look at economic development opportunities, we were asked to come in and develop a long-term plan for downtown parks and open space. And so I was able to bring 21 landscape architecture students into the community. You can actually see they went down, toured the community. They spent the day actually having focus group meetings with the community members. We're able to take that back to the studio and come up with designs to support that work. And so this is the kind of work that we were doing in 2019, and we would get to the end of this, we would take this through a student design process. We then invited the community back to campus. And so the community members, we had about 20 community members drive up. It's almost 3 hours from Connorsville to campus, but they drove up to actually participate in this presentation and hear the students' ideas. They then took all of these posters back to Connorsville and wallpapered the local library with them. Lots and lots of things are going on. But we had a critical missing gap in our center's outreach mission, which is that what happens after a studio project's over. And so again, where this project began was it started with Purdue Extension. From there, it led to bringing in the Center for Community and Environmental Design. I provided support consulting to get the community ready to start making decisions about downtown parks and open space. We then integrated the students and their studio and design work into this. Ultimately, this is where the gap started to fall into place. And so we're going to spend the rest of the talk this afternoon talking about the National Park Service Landscape Architecture Fellow, who's been hosted here at Purdue since last year, and about this partnership that we're building out with the National Park Service. But really what this allowed us to do in this particular instance is that Faith, who's going to be speaking a little later on, was able to come in alongside me on this project where I'd already been in with the community for almost 2 years at that point. She was able to take the students' design work directly with community members to turn that into a plan, a final plan that they were ready to move forward with to start fundraising. And we've actually since then completed really our involvement in this project and handed this off to a professional firm. So there is a landscape architecture firm now working with the community to finish out the fundraising stage and move towards construction on this project. And so the Conservation Legacy Fellow has really provided us with a critical element in our process to help support Indiana communities. And so where this gets us in the last slide I'm going to talk about before I turn it over to my partners who I'd like to feature for the rest of our talk today is that we had a capacity problem, and it's all about building partnerships and seeing where we can go. And you never know where those partnerships are going to come out of. And so in 2019, as a member of Purdue's land use team, so it's an extension team, we hosted a summit called the Indiana Land Use Summit. I don't know why it says Indiana Land Use Summer. I spelled it on my slides here. But I just happened to be that Mike Mencarini attended that summit, and he and I sat down next to one another and started talking about the work that we were doing. My work with the Center for Community and Environmental Design, and his work with the Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program. And there was a natural and direct overlap in that we are both providing planning and design support to communities across the Midwest. Well, ultimately, this led to a fellowship proposal where the idea was to bring a fellow to host them here at Purdue in our center, but have them be kind of the go-between between the National Park Service and Purdue University. COVID then kind of slammed into us sideways, and it slowed some things down a little bit, especially with onboarding our fellow. But Faith stuck with us. We were able to make some arrangements and bring her on as a Purdue employee, and then transfer her over to the federal government by the end of last summer. And that leads us to where we're at now. As we look towards the future, we are going to be continuing to recruit for this fellow moving forward. So we'll have a student whose role will be very similar to what Faith is going to discuss this afternoon, except hopefully under different conditions than what COVID is kind of restricted us to. We're hopeful that the fellow will be able to serve in terms of kind of an instructional role as somebody who can provide design support in the classroom, who can support us with community projects, but who can also be an active and engaged member of the RTCA Midwest regional team involved in many, many different projects. And so with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And I'm going to, oh, I've got one more slide, actually. I lied. So that's my introduction. I ran just a couple minutes long as we were waiting for people to log in. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off and let Mike introduce himself.
All right, thanks, Aaron. And I'm going to pull up my slides right now. So it should be good. Someone give me, Aaron, can you give me a thumbs up? The slides are up?
Yeah, okay. Everything's good.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Mencarini, and I am a community planner with the National Park Service. And I'm going to talk with you a little bit about our program and how the National Park Service supports communities in Indiana and across the Midwest, even if those communities aren't necessarily near a national park site in the way that some of you may think of the National Park Service. So our mission statement, and so the National Park Service, so think of the National Mall or think of the Grand Canyon, that agency. Our mission is to basically preserve unimpaired the natural and cultural resources of the country and cooperate with partners to extend the benefits of conservation and outdoor recreation throughout the country and the world. And so on many times people think of the National Park Service, they think of our very large national parks, like they think of Glacier National Park, which you can see, or maybe a little bit closer to home, they think of Indiana Dunes National Park up on the coast of Lake Michigan. But what I would challenge you to do today is think of that second sentence of the National Park Service mission statement. And so think of places like the Calumet River on the south side of Chicago, which is one of the project sites that our program is supporting right now. And as Aaron said, think of places like Connersville, Indiana, which is one of the places that Faith Welty, our fellow, supported both in her time in Purdue and as part of her duties as a landscape architecture fellow in the RTCA program. And when you think of the south side of Chicago, or you think of Connersville, Indiana, think of every single one of those dots across the country. Every single one of those represent an RTCA project where National Park Service staff have helped local partners with close to home recreation opportunities or natural resource conservation projects, in neighborhoods or communities or cities that are far from the Glacier National Parks or the Yosemites or the Yellowstones of the national park system. And so what is Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance? The National Park Service has more than 50 different community assistance programs that support local communities or partner organizations. These are things like the National Register of Historic Places or the Park Service Network to Freedom program, which highlights historic and cultural sites along the Underground Railroad. Or you think of things like the Route 66 Corridor Preservation Program. The RTCA program is one of those 50 different assistance programs. Our mission is to provide technical assistance to local governments or community organizations that are planning outdoor recreation or natural resource conservation projects in local communities. And so for us, outdoor recreation can span everything from, I just want to have a place that I can walk and experience being outdoors in my neighborhood, to hunting, fishing, snowmobile trails. And natural resource conservation can range from large landscape connectivity and habitat restoration down to how can we create pollinator gardens on our block and a piece of land that's currently underutilized. And what we come in is we help a partner go from, we've got a great idea for a project that we would like to see, to coming up with a feasible plan that can be implemented out in the community. And so in the Midwest region, we have about 9 staff that provide coverage to 13 different states in our region. So we're a small team, but we do the best we can with the staff we have, and we try to support every single geographic area in our region. And our staff are made up of community planners, landscape architects, and outdoor recreation planners. So a couple different skill sets, but they complement each other well. And so Faith came on as a landscape architecture fellow to help us with the design elements of kind of how we support local communities and coming up with those conceptual renderings. Because I, as a planner, wish I had that skill, but unfortunately I don't. So she's been a great help. And so these tend to be the different roles or positions that RTCA has. Although there's one other region that has a part-time historian, I think, that we just hired, which is a new one for us. And in the past, we've had some natural resource planners as well, with more of an environmental focus. And so these are the different things that our staff will help support. Again, you typically need to focus on outdoor recreation or natural resource conservation, but how we assist that particular partner with that particular project kind of changes depending on what the project is or where it is or who the partner can be. So these are the typical things that we can assist with when we get involved as part of a local community project. And so just as a quick example, one of the projects our program is supporting right now is in Ludington, Michigan, with Pere Marquette Township. And the township up there is set to acquire about 300 acres of property through a grant from the state DNR. And they want to turn this area into a regional amenity for people to spend time outdoors, kind of have a trail system, have it kind of supplement the local park system. But if you were to go to this area right now, here's what you would find. Not a very welcoming kind of introduction to this area. This is the Pere Marquette River. It's the western end of actually a federally designated wild and scenic river, and the end of it will flow into this new community recreation area. But this is how it looks like right now. And then kind of further inland, there's an old company day use park that's just been overgrown and is still there, but not currently open to the public. And so these partners came to RTCA and said, how can we take this and turn it into a regional amenity that people can use? And so we stepped in and we helped them do stakeholder outreach. In this photo, we brought in local partners from the DNR, from the local Army Corps office, community organizations, the local Chamber of Commerce. We kind of talked with them about what this potential project could be, and we got their input on what are the needs and desires of the community or what opportunities could be there. And then we also went out into the public. So we brought people in and said, come to the local town hall and let us know what type of recreation amenities would you like to see in a brand new park in your community? Or what kind of conservation programs would you like to see? Do you want to see more pollinator habitat? Do you want to see bird habitat? Is getting rid of invasive species the most important thing to you? Instead of just relying on a typical kind of town hall events that most planners kind of by default rely on, we went out into the community as well. So Laura and I spent a couple of days in Ludington where we set up shop in a local coffee shop. So we kind of had our presentation on what the project was and what the type of community input we wanted to get. And we set up in this local coffee shop. So as someone came in on a Saturday for their morning coffee, they got to talk to a national park ranger about future recreation opportunities in their community. And then after that, we set up at the local farmers market. So this is Laura and I. You'll be hearing from Laura shortly. As people were shopping for their produce, we asked them, do you want to see bike trails? Are those a good idea? Is having some hunting amenities a good idea or a not so great idea? And we had some local partners publicize it as well. The local bike shop pushed this out on their Facebook account. Stop by this weekend and talk to a national park ranger about what you would like to see in your community. And then I think the most creative thing that we did was we spent a day on the SS Badger, which is the passenger ferry that goes from Ludington to Oconomowoc, I forget the name. It goes across Lake Michigan into Wisconsin and back on certain days. And so we kind of set up the same presentation in there. And I like to claim that we have the only floating community outreach program in Park Service history that spanned 2 different time zones on the first day. And I'm going to stick with that until I'm proven wrong. And so we took all of that input that we received from stakeholder organizations and local residents and visitors, and then we assisted our main partners with the township develop a strategic planning workshop where they developed a vision for what this park could be. They developed a mission statement for what they'll do to make that vision a reality. And then we helped them identify strategic goals under certain categories like user experience or organizational capacity building. And then we identified further strategies and then specific action items that they could do over the next 1 to 5 years in order to make this dream a reality. And so that's kind of how RTCA supports local partners. We come in very early in the planning process when sometimes partners know what they want to accomplish. Sometimes they have a vague idea, but they need a little bit more direction. And we can assist them with going out in the community, facilitating these types of conversations, then help them develop a plan for how they can go out and make their dream a reality. And so in a nutshell, that's what the RTCA program is. I always like to end on this slide because I think that image on the left does a really great job of capturing the mission and the spirit of our program. It says there are a few parks everyone should see someday, and a few you could stop by this afternoon. And in my mind, RTCA is the Park Service mission that helps kind of create more of those wonderful places that you can stop by and see this afternoon in your very own community, allowing us to bring the ideals of the National Park Service to where you are, no matter where you live across our country. So with that, that is just a brief overview of the RTCA program. And I'm going to hand things over to my colleague, Laura Underhill, who's going to talk with you about how while we have landscape architects in RTCA, the National Park Service also has landscape architects that perform services within the National Park System. So Laura, take it away.
Thanks, Mike. So as Mike mentioned, I was with the Rivers Trails Conservation Assistance Program and not too recently here. And I switched over to the Denver Service Center, which I'll give you a little bit of an overview of that program coming up here. And my secret mission, or not so secret mission, is I'm a landscape architect by training. I didn't go to Purdue. I went to another university. And when I was in graduate school, I didn't really even know that these federal careers were an option. It took me a long road going from private sector, working on high-end residential developments in Arlington, Virginia, and doing a lot of nice fire pits for very wealthy people in that area, to working for state trails in Oregon and some local parks, to finally finding this niche. And so my mission, especially with Aaron's help, has been to try to educate folks that this is a career path that you can have. And it's pretty freaking cool because we have a really good history in that. So let's see if I can share screen. So, okay, it's moving slowly. So I just want to kind of ground us all in some history about the National Park Service. Everyone's seeing this okay? Okay. Let me know if you guys are having trouble. Everyone,
I think
you
we're
guys
good,
having
Laura.
trouble hearing
Yeah.
me?
No, Laura, you're good. Your audio's coming through just fine.
Cool. Okay. Okay, great. So I had unstable connection, so that's always one. Anyways, just to ground us all in kind of a little bit of history here. Everyone knows.
Hey, Laura, how about we try having you kill your video feed?
Sorry, I'll just
because we are starting to break up on your audio now. Can you turn your video off? There you go.
Okay. Let me know if this is any better.
That is so much better.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can see your screen and hear you. So
perfect. I will just disconnected from Pulse too. So anyways, just to ground us in a little bit of history about the Park Service. So the National Park Service came about through legislation called the Organic Act in 1916, which was actually, written and thought through by Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. So there's a really, really rich history of the National Park Service and landscape architects being tied together. FLO, really kind of pushed this legislation. And right now we have more than 84 million acres because of this. So there is this tie-in. So I'll give you a little update on the Denver Service Center. So that's where I'm working now. Denver Service Center you guys can read the slide, but the idea is basically the Denver Service Center operates like a in-house consultant to the Park Service. So Paul's on the call right now from Indiana Dunes. If he wants to get a road in his park redone or a plan redone, he can contract out to any firms that maybe you folks are used to working with in your fourth year, or he can contract in-house to the Denver Service Center. We're a full suite shop. Just for your information, the Denver Service Center has about 30 landscape architects in the whole department, and I'll give you a little bit of overview of what that organization is. This chart's just thrown in there for Mike Mencarini because I know he likes org charts. But really, just to give you guys an overview, it consists of kind of three big, for our purposes, groups. The planning division, which is where I'm housed, I'll talk about that a little bit. The design and construction division, and the transportation division. And all of them have landscape architects. All of them have landscape architects who are steering the conversation, which is great, and are the heads of these departments. So just in general, some kind of high level facts and figures. The contracting office, where we do a lot of our work, Mike talked about some of the, showed like some of the big projects and big names, the National Mall, things like that. I'll show you a few more. We award over, $300 million worth of construction contracts. Design and construction right now is managing $1.89 billion worth of projects, which is an insane figure I can't even wrap my brain around. Transportation is doing like 238 projects, $225 million. Planning has about 215 projects and 50 different types of projects and services. So we're pretty busy, and it's all working, most of it, I should say, is working with other national parks, which is really cool. Sometimes we work with other federal agencies, but just know it's an option out there, folks. So to give you a couple examples of projects that landscape architects have done, I figured I'd pick one at least from the Midwest, so you can just head south and west a little bit over to St. Louis there. And this project was the City Arch National Park, the Gateway Arch, as we remember. They did a big remodel of the landscape, huge public-private partnership. It was a $380 million project. This was led by landscape architects. So if you like high stakes, big public outreach projects, this is something that you could do for, the Park Service. And I think that's really neat because, like I said, it's not something that we think of. We think of private firms doing a lot of this, but we are touching a lot. And this is a cool project. Faith worked in St. Louis, so she can talk a little bit more about that. But, this project is really, really neat and has changed a lot of the face of, St. Louis right on the river's edge that way too. It was a very, very thoughtful. So here's a typical, rendering that they did beforehand, just to kind of get an idea of what this could be, who's the type of people, who are the type of users. These are the skills that LAs are bringing to these type of projects. They wanted to create an iconic place, bring about some like national historic elements, and think about a sustainable future. So they also really, really focused on the ground surrounding the arch. Landscape architects are helping push these conversations about being more sustainable. So most of the materials that they took out or brought in were tried to be like locally sourced, things like that you guys are probably learning in school. So applying some of that design knowledge out. I'll talk about one of the other branches where a lot of LAs are is the transportation division. They work on lots of roads and trails projects. So if you're really into technical construction details, this might be the place for you. This is a view looking, the photo on the left is looking at a completed project. The photo on the right is as it's being fabricated. There was a specific crane made for this project so they could actually like bring in precast concrete bridge segments. I am not a technical person, but I like that there are technical people in this world. So if you are interested in that kind of thing and like figuring out how construction works, there's some really cool, really challenging things like that you can do in transportation. So I just want to throw that out there because sometimes when people think of parks, it's like some of the positions that I'll talk about in a minute with planning. And then planning is my homeland. That's where I ended up and landed. And so DSC planning right now for this fiscal year has $8.4 million worth of planning products. Like I mentioned, 50 different types. I'm in the landscape architect group, and we tend to focus in the areas of SETPs, which is self-evaluation transition plan, which really helps parks figure out their accessibility needs. We're working on one in George Rogers Clark and Vincennes, just a hop, skip, and a jump for you folks over there. We'll do DCPs, and if you work in the federal government, as Faith has learned this past year, we love our acronyms. So it's something that if you're averse to acronyms, maybe you don't, the federal career might not be for you. DCP stands for Development Concept Plans. It's just essentially helping folks do site plans and designs. Trails we're really big in, and then visitor use, which is a very hot topic lately. So this is kind of the world that we live in. I wanted to give an example of one that we've done in the past so you guys have an idea. This was the Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore, so just up there in the UP. So landscape architects helped with this site plan, and Faith is working on something similar with Pictured Rocks. But it's nice. It's a good kind of area of overview for folks to just use our skill set to help people get a realistic cost estimate when they're doing planning, help it take it to the next level so they can start going, implementing it with facilities and things like that. So that's my high level. I know we'll wait till questions at the end. Let's see. I think that is it. So I'm going to stop sharing for now. And I'll turn it over. But I just want to one more thing. I can talk about this for days, and I'll be very cautious not to. I think if you are thinking about a career, you can get to the federal government. There's a lot of ways to get into the federal government, but you can always think about it for a few years out. I was very hesitant when I met with the transportation and design and construction to talk about this presentation. They said they like folks coming from the private sector. It helps bring, balance to folks too. So don't think that because you don't get a job right away or you don't feel qualified for a job right away that you can't work for the federal government. And it's really fun. It's like a super, super fun place to work. Because we work on some really cool places, like Mike showed, but all sorts of other ones like Indiana Dunes. So I'll throw that out because Paul's on the call. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Aaron.
All right, sounds good. Well, I'll just jump in briefly to say thank you to both Mike and Laura for sharing more information about both the RTCA program, but also just about, Laura, I've always appreciated your willingness to support our students and help them understand the options in kind of the public practice of landscape architecture. You also just featured the project in St. Louis. I actually began my career at the same firm that Faith 20 years later began her career at. And the project that you just showed built was one that was on the boards at my firm during that first year of as landscape architect for me. And so those are always wonderful projects to see featured. We're going to go ahead and transition now. We wanted to have an opportunity for Faith Welty to share her experience of the past year. It's been an interesting year, to say the least, to come into this fellowship role. Faith had to compete, or Faith is a 2020 graduate of the Purdue's landscape architecture program, but Faith had to compete against a national pool of applicants to get this position. And so I think that this is a conversation that began between Faith and I in her professional practice of landscape architecture course, trying to think through where she wanted to be professionally and thinking about the public sector options that might exist for her. I'll let her go ahead and fill in the details around that, but I will just say that I've been, just so, I think blessed is the right word here, to have Faith in this role over the past year, having somebody that both knew Purdue, but was also willing to be just unbelievably flexible in this position to make this work over the past year as we've gone through both Purdue restrictions due to COVID and National Park Service restrictions due to COVID. It has been an incredible challenge, and you've accomplished so much, and you're still, 5 months away from being done. So, right, we're really, just hitting the halfway mark right now. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aaron. Let me get this pulled up here. Can everybody see my screen there? Perfect. I did have a little bit of internet connection problems just a second ago, but hopefully it's all cleared up now. And yeah, so thanks again. And just reintroduce myself here. My name is Faith Welty, and I am the current landscape architecture fellow for the National Park Service's RTCA program. And like Aaron said, I'm a recent graduate of Purdue's LA program of just May 2020. And kind of with my prior experience in education and landscape architecture, I've really been able to support on a multitude of RTCA projects and provide help to local partners and other agencies that we've come into network with through visualizations, design, facilitation management, and so much more. So can everybody see my second slide too? I was having issues with that before.
Mhm.
Perfect. So a little bit about how, again, I got connected with the RTCA program is that Purdue University and the National Park Service are partnering and hosting this fellowship. And for me to be able to aid in the RTCA Midwest region and to be able to assist with Indiana projects as well and networking opportunities in conjunction with the CCED. So the National Park Service the National Park Service Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistant Program, again, supports community-led natural resource conservation and outdoor recreation projects across the nation. And it continues to provide opportunities to young professionals like myself to work within the federal government through the National Parks Program. So fellows are brought in for a term, about a year, and are required to complete a certain amount of hours of continued service on appropriate conservation projects and projects utilizing public land court legal authority. And basically what an appropriate conservation project is basically any project for conservation, restoration, construction, rehabilitation, natural, cultural, historic, and other kinds of resources like those. So I've been able to work with the different federal agencies, nonprofits, different superintendents, some are on this call, and local communities, to name a few, to help developing community relationships and supporting natural environment that we live in. So the partnership with Purdue has really allowed for these projects to link back to the program at Purdue, and partnerships with other national sites and parks have come out of this connection as well. This has also given the opportunity to have actual community and environmental design proposals brought into the student studios as well. So I've been able to work on about 21 different projects across the Midwest region. And I've also been able to work with a great staff and a lot of other folks, a part of the RTCA program across not just the Midwest, but across the nation, with an array of different specialized skills pertaining to like coalition building, tourism, ecology, site planning, and so much more. So one of the first projects that I was brought on to was working with local officials at the Nature Conservancy in Gary, Indiana, looking at the Gary Green Link Trail. And currently you can see here that the trail doesn't have much life to it, but the community group was really encouraged to recreate these locations so locals can have more of an opportunity for safe recreation, such as fishing, biking, walking, and really access to the city's natural areas. So I was able to provide placemaking concept designs for some of these sites, and they were able to be printed and used during a community event promoting the redevelopment of these local areas. Another project is the Great Cities Institute. It's a research center at the University of Illinois, and this project is based in Chicago. And this is a project about greenscape opportunities that give residents a better access to the Calumet River and to really enjoy more like passive recreation and also community green space. And these may seem like smaller implementations compared to what the National Parks is usually known for, but these projects are the inner network that connect place to place. So I'm going to talk about Connersville, which Aaron had previously mentioned before, and just how I was kind of brought into this project. So again, some of you may be familiar with this site. This was a previous studio project led by the CCED that had engaged the efforts of the junior studio students to conceptualize a recreation and open space plan for this pocket park in Connersville, Indiana. And out of the work came many great ideas and solutions to restore that space in the community. So with the partnership between RTCA and CCED, I was able to step into this project and continue that implementation and engagement with the locals to really compile and further develop the site plan, utilizing like playscape features and concepts and previous designs. And as you can see, there was a photo that was taken from the site where they were able to bulldoze and really encourage the community that there's something that's coming here, and they can't wait for it to really be up and going. Another project that we do, we also work with some consultations, and that can later on be advanced into full projects. So the DeSmit Trail project in South Dakota began as a conceptualization of a multi-use path that deals with the Department of Transportation and public conservation practices due to the watershed system that it crosses and the migration patterns of the natural wildlife that lives there. So I was able to collaborate with a small community group to research opportunities for a multimodal floating boardwalk system through the watershed areas and along the right-of-way. And by producing these conceptual section diagrams, the detail can really be used for those community partners to apply to grants or funds and get implementation started. So another collaboration that I was able to assist with was the leadership from the Ohio River Recreation Trail and the Lewis and Clark Historic Trail experience to be able to provide these fresh eyes on enhancing tourism and outdoor recreation to towns in Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky, all along the Ohio River. And these towns could apply to be a part of this workshop called Rivertown Reviews. So unfortunately, due to some of the circumstances, these workshops were not able to be held in person. However, virtual engagement was still able to happen. So towns were able to apply and be able to really storytell about their experiences in the communities and what other opportunities could be enhanced. Creating this action through like SWOT analysis, brainstorming project priorities, and identifying opportunities for these towns. We're currently working on creating a summary of suggested strategies to consider based on best management practices. So in the near future, leadership is looking to continue these partnerships between all these towns so that collaboration about better tourism can occur across the river. And like mentioned before, there's another project closer to home here in Vincennes, Indiana, for the George Rogers Clark National Historic Park. And so in the past, you can see here that there ran a railroad along the Wabash that has been dug up, and it's currently leaving a large trench, and it's looking to be revitalized. Existing conditions are in need of updates and solid connections for visitors to access the memorial as well as the waterfront. So I was able to support the George Rogers Clark National Park Superintendent with planning documents proposing potential trail amenities and opportunities to be used for the National Investment Review Board submission. So this submission essentially would help implement the application to be able to proceed with design updates on the site. So another project over in Springfield, Illinois is the National Historic Site of Abraham Lincoln's home. And this has fortunately been one of the sites I was able to visit on my fellowship. So the initial project scoping surrounded the visitor use management of the site and really the sense of arrival for visitors and staff, kind of how they would come into the site and navigate through processes of parking their car, getting to tour groups, or like finding a place to gather. And our team was able to create a facilitation and design workshop with the staff around this topic to really solicit more ideas of improved recommendations. And this is more of thinking critically about how people come in and out of the site and what the intention is when they're there, and also universal design, to name a few. So I was able to also attend a day-long value assessment, and of the existing infrastructure of the site. And this experience really also gave me insight on the complexity and intention that goes into national sites, let alone historic landmarks, when it comes to modernization and preserving the past. So the next project I'll also hit on is we were having a collaboration with the park superintendent and staff at Pictured Rocks up in Michigan. And we began the redesign of these 3 day use areas along the Grand Sable Lake area. So working along with another fellow on our team, we were able to do a lot of research and compilation of GIS data that was brought together to create a base map that would provide like cultural and natural resources as well as archaeological data information before the design of the sites had started. So along with this redesign, we have been able to put into consideration the increase of visitation and the visitor use management plan to find preferred alternatives and recommendations at the site. And there have been a lot of access issues currently, and you can kind of see on these existing photos on the left, and somewhat of a footprint to work from, but we wanted to be able to enhance that user experience through accessibility and opportunity to recreate in a multitude of ways, like fishing or kayaking launches, and even boating. So currently I'm working on bringing these designs to a more formal presentation, and we'll be continuing to collaborate with the park staff as they are able to visit these areas in the coming weeks, since the weather is a lot nicer, and they'll get a better understanding of what those current existing conditions and locations are. So next is this project that I've been working on with Laura and Mike, which has been going on for a while. And it's been, I've really enjoyed this project because it's brought in a lot of different things I didn't think I would be able to experience, especially as a landscape architect. And I'll give photo credits to Laura for this beach photo here. So this is the Huron-Manistee National Forest Sustainable Rec Plan project, and it's an ongoing project. This forest spans the entire state and is really close to some major cities. So there's a lot of visitation that occurs here. And the Forest Service primarily is focused on timber, but there are a lot more opportunities, especially for outdoor recreation. And this is one of the beautiful beaches I was talking about. And in many ways, especially in the past year, public lands have really been getting loved to death. So a lot of access and ability to recreate has changed over the past year due to the pandemic. But forest leadership on the Huron had come to our team and to not just tackle just the short-term challenges, but what are happening with recreation trends and visitation on the forest. But also looking at a horizon scan of about 20 years into the future to better plan ahead for what outdoor rec could look like in terms of changes of demographics, recreation trends. Like some examples is seeing more like electric bikes and how that might impact trail systems, or taking into consideration shorter winter months and seasons because of the effect on climate changing and how it's changing when people can go snowmobiling or other winter sports. So we're continuing to facilitate discussions with the forest staff, and I've also gotten the chance to work very closely with social scientists. So this is the part where I didn't think I would be able to really be a part of this or getting that experience as a landscape architect fellow. So I've been able to work with social scientists from the Forest Service on creating really thought-provoking surveys to internal staff to better solicit ideas on how to improve the forest based on demographic changes and recreation trends. So throughout this plan, I've been able to assist on gathering intel and recommendations for future recreation planning from the internal staff, external staff, and superintendents of other highly recreated parks through surveys and interviews. The external stakeholder outreach was a large undertaking while partnering with the forest leadership team, and we also were able to perform community outreach to organizations that are important partners and voices in outdoor recreation. So after connecting with these organizations and friends groups, we were able to host a virtual workshop with over 55 participants. And all of these were different partner groups throughout the state of Michigan and beyond. to be able to share ideas and things that they had been experiencing in the world of outdoor recreation and to come up with a list of those recommendations. So this is an ongoing project right now. So in the future now, we're working on compiling those recommendations for the forest leadership team and for them to be able to identify what the plan for and prioritize the next 20 years and how to better prepare and create recreational opportunities in the forest for the next 20 as well. And this is a good example of us coming as a facilitator to help with community outreach and engagement and develop kind of a list of strategic planning goals. So lastly, even though due to the circumstances over the past year of my fellowship, it's mostly been working from home, and that's kind of inhibited me being able to travel very much. But I've still been able to have some opportunity to go on some site visits to a couple projects in person, such as Hegwish Marsh here in Chicago, the Lincoln Home, and also being able to go on site visits to meet up with some other colleagues that I work with on a day-to-day basis. And even though I only had a chance to meet a few people, the networking opportunities have been there virtually as well, where many staff have been able to come together and share as a community. Here's an example of us. It's a virtual pet party. So this has been kind of like a brief overview of what I've been able to work on and how I've been able to really be involved over this past year, even during these strange circumstances and times. But yeah, so I wanted to open it back up to Aaron and the rest of the team, and we welcome any questions that you have. But yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, and thank you, Faith, for that overview. Again, it's just amazing to me, just in how short amount of time, how much you've been involved in, and the diversity of the projects that you've been able to participate in. So we are going to turn this over to questions here in a minute, but I also just want to go ahead and mention, just in terms of how this partnership continues to grow. We currently have the superintendent for Indiana Dunes National Park. So Paul's on. Paul and his staff are actually currently supporting 6 different capstone projects this semester. They've been absolutely unbelievable partners. The RTCA staff have been supporting in that partnership as well. But Paul, Rafi especially has just been a rock star for working with the students. Probably one of the best service learning partners I've ever had in getting the students connected to other community members who need to hear this information and need to have an opportunity to give input into those capstone projects. We're also looking to the future. We were discussing this with Laura at the Denver Service Center. Next fall, we are working on setting up a studio project for our junior landscape architecture studio that will focus on the Ozark National Scenic Riverway. And so we'll be developing some ecological planning and doing some actual site design to support really efforts along the current river to manage some of the flood damage that they've had over the last several years to critical infrastructure within that. It's about a 140-mile long linear park as part of the National Park System. These are partnerships that wouldn't exist without Mike and I having bumped into each other one day at a land use summit, right? And so we're going to go ahead and turn this over to questions. I'm going to go ahead and start with the one that Megan asked here. So Mike, I'm going to throw this one at you. Under normal non-COVID situation, what does it look like to work for RTCA? And she's asking, how does it work with all of you remotely? And, how does that partnership come together?
Yeah, it's a little mix of everything, Megan. So in the Midwest region, my boss sits in Omaha, Nebraska, which is where the Park Service regional office is. But then we have some staff kind of spread out amongst those 13 states. So we've got 5 different field offices, and we typically have 1 to 2 staff members in each field office, and they provide coverage of a certain geographic area. So I'm based in Chicago. I'm the only full-time staff member in Chicago, and I cover Illinois and part of Indiana and part of Michigan right now. And so if a project comes up in any one of those states and it gets assigned to me, I have to go and do site visits and meet with partners there, host community workshops or meetings or outreach events. So we can't kind of move to the area permanently, but we each do have our own travel budget for going out and supporting partners on site. So I would say in any given year, I'll probably make 3 to 5 trips to a project site for either quarterly meetings or doing site visits or community outreach events. So during normal times, we're on the road a lot more. I'm probably only in my office at most maybe 2 to 3 days a week. So we are kind of on the road a little bit more on project sites. The past year, we've been supporting remotely, and which we've managed to do an okay job with, but I think everyone's looking forward to getting back on the road and meeting in person again.
Thank you.
Well, and I'll just say for the fellow position, we do have a permanent office space in the horticulture building, so that you have direct access to our landscape architecture studios here at Purdue. So, I mean, you would have a home base, provided for you with a desk and everything, because we're really trying to allow this person, the whole idea was to allow this person to really feel like an integrated part of the Purdue Landscape Architecture program, while also working on RTCA program, projects all over the Midwest and supporting the partnership projects as well. Unfortunately, National Parks has not cleared RTCA staff to go back to the office yet. And so Faith's desk, I don't think has been used to date. And so she's been in the building a couple of times for specific activities, but they've been much more restrictive in terms of their allowances. Fortunately, with the vaccine coming out, being much more widely available, I've been hearing the sounds from National Park Service partners that things are changing or will be changing here pretty quick.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if whoever is accepted into the position next year gets out into the field and gets to visit a couple of national park sites or partner sites. Part of the way we structure the fellowship is that they have funding available to cover that cost of travel.
Aaron, can you talk a little bit more about the involvement of the fellow with like Purdue?
So what we're ideally looking for in this situation, and as part of being a good host, and I think you'll see this with a lot of RTCA staff, is that they're all hosted somewhere. Mike's hosted at you're hosted at University of Illinois Chicago campus, correct? Right. Is that we want you to feel like you're a member of the Purdue community while in this position. And so what that would mean for Purdue Landscape Architecture is that we want this person to be directly involved in our studios. We're going to invite you in for, we're going to invite the fellow in for direct interaction with students, to provide design critiques, to be part of that process, to give some input, especially as we start developing out this project, looking at the Current River in southern Missouri, where we have a National Park Service site. It's an RTCA program and a Purdue studio. We would expect the fellow to step into a lead role, I think, in terms of, communicating between RTCA staff and the studio itself. The other thing that we're hoping to leverage is just coming through this partnership is that there are lots of experts that work for the National Park Service in the related fields. And so Laura was just talking about, NEPA, so environmental protection regulations, as a part of this. If we're working on, anytime there's federal money involved in any of these projects, NEPA rules apply. And so we could bring in Laura to talk about NEPA process and how it affects design. Same thing goes as we look, our partner with RTCA in Missouri, Ashley, is a recreation specialist. And so she's somebody that we're going to, have come in and basically lecture on in her area of expertise, so that the students are getting a broader range of perspectives from National Park Service employees that have this, kind of practical hands-on information to share with those who, whether you're going to be working in public practice in a role like this or in private practice, all of these are relevant. Relevant areas of expertise to landscape architecture.
So I'm happy to answer any other questions people might have about our program or how we support local communities or this fellowship opportunity next year. But since we're talking about the Park Service and Indiana, I would be remiss not to at least invite Superintendent Paul Labovitz maybe to share some of his perspectives on how the National Park Service is supporting local communities in Indiana.
Thanks, Michael. I have to give a disclaimer that I spent 17 years in the RTCA program. And so I'm a bit of a shill for the discussion. But I will also say, and I've said this to a lot of folks, that the way that the Rivers and Trails program conducts their work is actually, I think, one of the best training grounds for national park superintendents, because that propensity to outreach and partnering and looking beyond the boundaries of a place are really critical, especially when you're managing a park like Indiana Dunes that's nestled in 3 counties within the view of the city of Chicago. We don't do anything by ourselves here. So, Michael and his team and my experiences of the past, we've worked on small community-based projects, and we've worked on projects that literally crisscross the entire country. And so the scale of the projects is, there is no definition. It could be anything. And so here at Indiana Dunes, we're working feverishly on a trail project to connect Michigan and Illinois through Northwest Indiana. It's called the Marquette Greenway. And Michael and Faith and the students that Aaron had mentioned are biting off pieces of this and really getting the communities excited about their particular piece of the pie. And we're here at the park, we're a partner, but it's always helpful to have someone come in from somewhere else to get people excited about the opportunities locally. And I don't know what it is. It's people just tend not to believe, somebody who's too close by. So the outside expert comes in, and the RTCA program's got, I don't know, 25 years now, credibility built up across the nation, and has done a great job. So there's not a project in Indiana. Many of you are familiar with the Monon in Indianapolis. That was an RTCA project long ago. A lot of the trail connections up here into Illinois, the Pensy Greenway, an RTCA project. The Pumpkin Vine Trail in Goshen and Middlebury, Indiana, an RTCA project. I could go on and on and on, and it's really long-term strategic community planning and economic development with a little side dish of conservation and recreation opportunities. And when the results actually hit the ground, it's the only job I've ever had where people call me years later and say, I just want to thank you again for what you did 25 years ago, because it was everything you said it would be and more. So, this is really, really fabulous, rewarding work. And I am not a landscape architect. I have to give that caveat. I'm a forester and a wildlife biologist, and I come at it from a different angle. But what I liked about the RTCA program was it brought all these different kinds of people together, and it's great to hear that they've hired a historian. That blows my mind. And because there's so much to these projects beyond just planning and design. So it's been fascinating. And I will tell you that, and I've worked on conservation projects through RTCA in about 30 states, and you meet the best people in the community who work on these projects. It's the most uplifting work you can do.
All right, thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. Always great to get some of your wisdom on the role of RTCA in the state of Indiana. I have seen a couple other questions. So Miles Romans asked, are the majority of projects started from us reaching out to communities or RTCA coming to us? It's a little bit of both. We do have an open application period every year where we send out an RFP and communities or partners can apply for our assistance. But as Paul mentioned, one of the great things about RTCA is our network, and so I've been with the program for 5 years, and after 5 years of going to community meetings or regional workshops, you kind of build a network and get to know people. And so lots of times we can kind of identify a need for a particular project in a community, and we can kind of nudge those partners to say, hey, I think there's a potential role for us to assist here. Would you be open to inviting us to come in? And so the answer to your question is a little bit of both, depending on the partner and the project. And then I see a question from Kyle. Typically, how many RTCA fellowships are given every year? I would guess maybe 10 or so across the country. Laura, Faith, does that sound more or less right? In the Midwest region, we will typically have between 1 to 3. And some of those are through Conservation Legacy, which is what Faith applied for. And another is through a partnership called the Hispanic Access Foundation. And so we have a couple fellows through that partnership as well. But it's not just the Midwest region. You know, these fellowships are available in Atlanta or Austin or San Francisco or LA across the country. Faith, Laura, is maybe about 10 or so every year. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think it could be a little higher, I would think.
Yeah, I think between the Conservation Legacy and HAF, they're like combined, there's like upwards of like probably 15 to 20.
Okay.
There's like quite a few.
I'd also throw out too that there, because I will give a larger perspective, there's other opportunities besides these fellowships that sometimes come up. I know the Fish and Wildlife Service has an intern. Faith and I were working with them briefly on the Shiawassee project, and that was a 3-month fellowship internship type of thing. And then at the end of it, they get direct hire authority, which makes it a little bit easier to get a federal job. So keep your eyes peeled for some of that. I think in our world, it's called a rigorous intern. I don't exactly know if it was like a science fellow intern or something like that, but that's an opportunity that comes up. Sometimes there's scientists in the park. Sometimes there's some different avenues for these kind of opportunities that aren't just RTCA fellowships. Mike, I think we have another comment if you want to read that one.
Paul is recommending doing your internship with the National Park Service. I do think it would be more fun. Any other questions from people in the audience? If not, Aaron, is there anything else that we're forgetting that you think would be beneficial information for this university community or your students?
No, I think this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon and for joining us. And I think more than that, Mike and Laura, you were definitely part of founding this partnership as well. Is right. Just your enthusiasm for kind of reaching out and finding a way to make this work. You know, especially here in Indiana, where currently we don't have an active RTCA staff member. This has just been amazing to be able to connect the National Park Service back into some of the projects that some of them that come to us here at Purdue that we don't have capacity for, that we can pass along, and others that, you know, we could potentially grow into and be working on for the next 20 years. And so really is an exciting time. This is an exciting partnership. And I'm just going to sum up, you know, go with along with what I heard from Paul, which is that I do believe that this kind of community engaged design practice is absolutely the best way to go in anybody's career. The rewards you get from working on, you know, working with communities that are truly grateful for the skills that we have as landscape architects. One of our speakers a few weeks ago called them our superpowers as landscape architects. You get people excited about, you know, seeing a different vision for the future in their community. That's exactly what we're involved in every day. It takes some hard work to get there, but that's what I love about the RTCA team, and I'm so glad that they're out there doing this kind of work for us, especially as, you know, national parks, the need for public open space, the public health benefits of all of this, right? This is money well invested. So the last thing, and Rhonda, Paul tipped me off that you were here. I don't know. Do you just want to go ahead and unmute and share? Nice to meet you, Rhonda. I don't think we've met before. So.
Hi, it's good to see all of you. I love all of your stories. We love landscape architects here. We're doing a project here to do an accessible trail from our visitor center to our Pioneer Cemetery. And I came from my previous post at the Gateway Arch National Park. So I was very excited to be part of that park transformation, all of your inspiring work transforming that waterfront area into the mecca that it is now for recreation and walking and bike riding and gatherings. And how about that elevated pedestrian bridge? Isn't that just something that is extremely unique and really wonderful? So I carried a lot from what I've learned from the projects I've observed you doing from previous parks to where I am now, and carry your inspiration with me of the wonderful things that we can offer our visitors. So thanks for your work, and the invitation is extended to come visit us anytime in Southern Indiana.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And so, yeah, it's the the St. Louis Arch and reconnecting it to downtown was a dream of people that mentored me in the profession. And unfortunately, Jim Fetterman's passed away, but Jim was the one that kept that dream alive for about 40 years in the city of St. Louis. And he lived long enough to see that park finished. And so, right, huge impact that we can have as landscape architects. So, all right, with that.
Urban and rural. Urban
What's that?
and rural. That's
Urban and rural, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's, you know, I mean, there's some colleagues of mine that have spent their careers on something that they've tried to describe it separately as rural design issues, and I think at the end of the day, they've realized that it's just bringing the power of design and community problem solving together, no matter where you're at. And so, again, we've run a few minutes over here. I really appreciate all of you. You know, who've logged on here today and joined us for this conversation. If anybody's interested in learning more about the fellowship opportunity, again, this National Park Service Fellow that will be hosted here at Purdue, but as a member of the RTCA team, certainly feel free to reach out. And I think the other place is I posted it here in the comments, and I'll leave this up just so you scroll back up to the top. I've created a bit.ly link to the Conservation Legacy site that has the entire job description on it. And so you can certainly go ahead and track down more information there. So with that, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to go ahead and stop recording at this point. So.